Hi, I'm Kacey.
And I'm Gianni.
I never finished reading the Animorphs books as a kid, and I still haven't as an adult.
And I've never read them.
We can't tell you where we live.
But we can tell you that we want to revisit these books as adults and dive into what we would keep or change if we were to put it on TV.
Two friends, 50-something books. Welcome to Morphin Buddies.
And then the music kicks in, and then people are just so ready.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Morphin Buddies, the podcast. It's me, your host, Kacey Sosnowski, and right next to me, Mr. Gianni DeMaia.
Yo, 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 yo.
Yo, yo,
Sorry, I was
yo,
trying
yo.
something. I was trying something new.
You just couldn't follow through 100%?
No, I kind of fizzled out on the third yo, and then I was
you gave up on yourself.
And then I was in too deep, and then I was like, all right, well, this is gonna be a couple of yos.
Do you want to redo? Do you want to try again?
Nah, I don't care that much. At this point, if you're listening to this many episodes, you're either in or you're out. You know what I mean?
That's true. But honestly, I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, you're either in on the energy or you're like, nope, no more.
Nope.
Thank you.
Well, today I don't have anything interesting to start out the podcast with. So, but there's a decent amount to talk about, I feel like, in this book, which is number 10, The Android.
Yeah. Another Marco book.
Yeah, and it wasn't Rob the Robot. You were close, though.
No, I was close, though. Because you know what? My other thought was, I was like, if it was Andy... I was like, Andy the Android, and that would have been close, even closer. That was my second guess, was Andy the Android. And I was like, shit, I should have said, but I mean, I was still off, so it didn't matter.
You're still off.
I was close.
Honestly, when I asked you what you thought his human name would be, I was kind of hoping you would guess Eric, just so I could, lose my shit immediately.
That would have been so... clutch, but I think I think also everybody would have just been like, you cheated, which I wouldn't have, but I would have assumed that if I had guessed it correctly, if I was someone listening to this show and I heard me guess it correctly, I would be like, he cheated for sure.
So
I didn't guess it correctly,
but you didn't,
just so that you'd believe me. Audience people.
Cool. Anyway, oops, sorry, my virus protector just came up and was like, do you want to exit? And it's like, suddenly an update is happening and now it wants me to exit, and I just got slightly distracted. There's just a lot popped up suddenly. But now it's fine. Everything's fine.
Now we're good.
We got a little bit of a rocky start with the, disappointment on Gianni's end, and then my virus protection.
Yeah, it's just the exact opposite energy of what we had last episode. Yeah.
It's all downhill
Everything
from
falls
here,
apart.
folks.
I'm sweating in my apartment. It's so hot outside.
Yeah.
It's just all downhill.
Yeah. All right, well, The Android, how did we feel about it?
So I think we can officially say that Marco books are the best books, right?
Yeah.
We have two Marco books now. Both of them, in my humble opinion, are the two best books in the series that we've read up to this point. Marco is... it's not even just that Marco is, the most interesting protagonist, because he is such a different perspective when we're reading him than the other characters. But it's not just the POV that feels fresh and new. It's also... he gets all the best plot elements. In his first real outing, of course, we had the major kind of plot twist of his mother being Visser 1. And here we have a very compelling plot that's also really thematically resonant in regards to this android. This was a title that very much aligned with the content of the book as well, which is helpful.
Right in the very beginning, we got an android.
Yeah, off the rip, it was already bang, that's the guy. And it was really, really interesting to read the perspective, because we've had a lot of, like, you know, the sort of taxation, the emotional taxation of, like, the war, right? This sort of covert kind of Cold War that we're waging against the Yeerks here. But this was the first time that it was ever like the cost of violence specifically was weighing on anybody in particular. And, you know, not to jump ahead to spoilers, so I'm gonna avoid that for the time being, but they kept it. I thought Applegate was this one co-written by Michael Grant too? Yeah, it was. So I thought that the two of them, they really did a good job of keeping it at the forefront at all times of sort of like the violent nature of this war, and then the cost, you know, the sort of emotional cost of that, and how that carried through into the finale, which you had teased on the last episode, and you were very right that it was surprisingly dark, in a way that I think was brilliant, and I think really carried through in a lot of the themes. I think that Marco as a point of view character also can get away with a lot of these darker kind of plot elements, because they don't need to fluff up this sort of comedic element or keep things light and airy with, like, you know, a globules moment. Instead, you just have Marco being Marco, and Marco being Marco is just kind of someone who is defensive in and of themselves, and uses comedy as like a sort of defense mechanism in how they navigate through everyday life. So it didn't feel forced. It felt like the tone really grew to this place, and I mean, if it's funny because when I look at my list here, I go back and forth between this one or The Predator being better. I think if it's not for The Predator's like plot twist that you can see coming, but is still like very, very prevalent. I don't know. I don't know which one is better. I think this one might be better. I have it at number 2 right now, but this might be the best one we've read so far.
It is. It doesn't have like a silly beginning that doesn't really have any effect on the plot going forward.
It has an annoying fucking thing at the beginning, but
we'll get to it.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Also, I realized Marco is the one that nearly dies the most in this entire series. In almost every book, he gets his stomach ripped out. He gets his arms ripped apart. I get scared for him, and I'm like, why is it always Marco?
Yeah, and twice in this book he is
nearly dead.
The closest to dead we've seen yet.
Yeah, for real.
In anyone in the Animorphs.
Terrifying. Do you think this could have worked as a Cassie book at all?
I mean, here's the thing, right? I don't think we've read a book thus far that is, aside from maybe The Captive, I don't think we've read a book thus far that is like, oh, this has to be this character. Well, I guess also what's the Predator? I guess also The Predator has to be a Marco book, but I don't think we've read a book thus far that is like intrinsically tied to the point of view character. So like, yes, this could have been a Cassie book. I like it better as a Marco book for the reasons that I was saying earlier, just about, I think tonally, like, it really earns its kind of like emotional depth at the end, because you have Marco as a character who is just inherently kind of a goof. And I just think it maybe flows better in regards to building to a tone this dark. But yeah, that's not to say that it can't be a Cassie book. Why did you think that specifically?
Well, the couple moments in the book, she kind of brought up a couple interesting points, and that made me curious of like what's going on in her brain. What is she thinking of? How is she coming to these conclusions in her own head? And I mean, obviously we know why it's so important to her that she gets that point across. But I was just kind of curious as to what her journey would look like in this book, what kind of, I guess, inner turmoil she probably has with the things that they're doing. And we didn't really get that much of that. With Marco, it was kind of more of an even tone of like, here's a little bit of comedy and here's a little bit of really scary stuff, but it all felt true to his character, which I really appreciated. It felt very even, like you said. But with Cassie, I'm wondering, like, how was she affected by this situation? Watching, like, Marco nearly die, what was that like for her? What were those moments leading up to Marco bleeding out and then getting him out of the building? What did she see? So, I mean, I don't want to get too into that end bit until we get there, but
Right.
I was kind of curious because she also seemed to have a different opinion from everyone else. And yeah, I was just curious to explore that a little bit more, but we can talk more about that when we get there too.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought. I mean, obviously, this is one of those books where it's like the ramifications are kind of so big that I would hope that they address this in later installments. And sort of remains to be seen, obviously, right now, how it's going to kind of reverberate through the rest of the series moving forward. But and that's not just the emotional cost of the climax. That's also just like very literally the plot elements revealed in this book, because there are many that are introduced here. And I will say too, so it's like kind of, I think I had alluded to this earlier. I can't remember what the last like crazy species. What was the species that took us outside of time? That one in that one book. Do you remember? Do you remember what
the
I'm talking about?
cockroach when they got sucked up by the taxon on the tongue?
No. The one that literally paused time, and then showed them like the future, right?
Yeah,
Do you know
that's
what I'm talking
that's the
about?
Ellimist book, right?
The Ellimist, yeah. So because we're now at a place where, every single time we're introduced to a new species, we're introduced to somebody that is just like
super
a literal god to this galaxy. and it's now to the point where it's like, okay, we have no other. I'm kind of like, how in the world can there be so many people just sitting on the sidelines that all have the capability to just like absolutely put a pause to everything?
That's true.
Right now?
I mean, I get that point. I mean, I think they explained it pretty decently in this book. I mean, it was a whole plot point, but this race is super strong, and their only limitation is they can't do any violence. So
right, it's just funny because it's like, because you're right, it is like an inherent sort of plot line in this one. But what I find interesting about it is that, again, you have a race that's been around for so long. It seemed pretty obvious that was what was happening. The second that they're like dogs and they accidentally run into this entity, they already. So I'm like, okay, someone somewhere has also figured this out at a certain point in time, right? No one else has thought to like use this to their advantage. And then, of course, you have Eric himself, who is like obviously has his own thoughts and opinions, which then raises the question: is like, who else among this group has their own sort of free will thoughts and opinions that also have the instinct to maybe change their programming in some way, shape, or form? And so it gets to the point where like now we're at we have the time turner and we have about like 4 of them. And so you're like, I don't want to outright say there's no way that she's gonna stick the landing here on some of these,
sure.
Because but there definitely is like that fear in me that it's like, okay, are we just gonna keep introducing like incredibly powerful, formidable, and then just not use them because contrivance to the plot, So it's just something to acknowledge and be concerned about. I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I can't remember any other alien species that's introduced. I don't know if there are more in the future or not. I don't remember. Like I said, I've only read up to like maybe mid-30s, early 40s, and I'm most familiar with like the first 12. So anything past like 12, I really don't remember. I'm kind of scratching around in the dark. I kind of do want more alien species to come in and having like different strengths and things like that. But yeah, that is a really interesting point of like, how many other species are there that care about this war? Do they want to help the Andalites? Do they want to help the Yeerks? What powers do they have? If they are all powerful and this is something that could affect them, why are they not doing anything? So that's a really interesting point. And I also like the point that you brought up of Eric changing his programming. And in a way, I feel like this book, all the Animorphs kind of had to change their programming a little bit to be okay with making a race violent for their cause. There's even a moment in it where Rachel says, you got to eat or be eaten. And I mean, yeah, they seem kind of reluctant about it, but yeah, anyway, we can get deeper into that when we get to that part. But I just thought that popped into my head, and that was really interesting that happened. I thought of that. So yeah, should we dive into this book?
Let's
do it. So what happens? There's a little concert happening. Do you know who's playing at the concert, Gianni?
Yeah, I can't for the life of me remember what band they were singing. Though.
It was 9 Inch Nails, Alanis Morissette, and The Offspring.
Yeah.
Which what a lineup!
You know what's funny is that they
90s.
keep being like, "Yeah, we can't tell you where we are at the beginning of every book," and that's like, anybody just googling like, when was this lineup a thing? It's like, oh, they're in Bonnaroo or whatever. You know, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so Marco and Jake, they really want to sneak into this concert. Obviously, you know, they have to sneak in, so they decide to sneak in as dogs. Now, you may be asking yourself, that's really funny, because we started the whole opening of the last book with the two girls being afraid to turn into rats because Jake would find out. And what is Jake doing on his little off time?
The first thing he does. The first thing.
Fucking thing. I mean, give me a break. And this is one of those books that, like, Jake really is, like, totally whatever. Didn't bother me at all. Except for the fucking way they started this. I was like, are you kidding me? What? Can we get some consistency? Just some. If he's
Gianni, he's got to use it for his personal gain.
If he's gonna be a dude who's just gonna backslide on his word, then I need him to be chastised for it, or I need him to acknowledge it. But he can't just be doing it, and then we cut to another character who's like, "Oh, Jake's gonna be so mad at me," or if so facto leader. I'm like, give me a break. This guy does not follow his own rules.
No, he really doesn't.
I mean,
and it is kind of frustrating how mad he gets at literally everyone else. And then he just does it himself because he wants to see 9 Inch Nails.
Infuriating. Yeah. I want to hit this guy in his little mouth. So
yeah, and then when they meet up with everybody else later, nobody yells at him.
Not a single person.
Or calls him out.
No.
Not a single person.
No, they don't care. Oh, what? You were dogs? Wow, cool.
Cool.
I'll be terrified of you next time I try to do the same exact thing for my own fun. Ridiculous. So they sneak in as dogs.
Yeah.
And as they're, sort of wandering around, they notice somebody who's passing out flyers for the sharing. So they're like, oh, fucking great. The person gets close to them. And Marco recognizes the guy. He recognizes him as someone named Eric. It kind of, there's like a direct line to this later where someone's like, well, you're friends with him, Marco. And Marco's like, we're not friends. Like, I know the guy.
We know him, but I don't know him.
He's one of those fringe dudes that, like, know what I mean? Like, you've talked to him a couple of times, and so then other people who don't really know you that well are like, oh, yeah, you guys must be friends. But it's like, no, I don't know this guy that well. Like, he's like a classroom acquaintance at best, And so anyway, this guy Eric comes up, and he, like, kind of pets him. And immediately, Jake and Marco were like, that was weird. And they're talking about it immediately after, that Eric had no smell.
Nothing.
Not a single smell upon the man. So something is off. They are basically talking about, like, we should go investigate or whatever. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, they send Tobias to, like, go kind of, like, spy on the guy a little bit. And
They see
Tobias
him.
agrees that something's off. They end up like all looking at him, and he gets like hit by a bus. This part confused me a little bit.
He got hit by a bus,
this
and nobody
lost me a
cared.
little. Yeah,
No one cared that a child just got rammed by a school bus. No one ran to him. There were no teachers, no cops. It was deserted except for Tobias and Marco. No one gave a shit.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one that was like, that was a little strange to just throw in there.
He's just like, okay,
But yeah,
I'm fine.
it outright says, so like the sequence of events, right? The kid gets hit by a bus accidentally, right? And the way Marco describes it is like, we saw him for a moment, like the real him. And it was like this sort of weird, like steel-plated mechanical thing. Yeah. And then a moment later, Eric was there, right?
Yeah.
But then they're like, the bus just drove away, not even knowing what happened. Don't know how that's the case.
That's bus driver's like, I can't get another notch on my record. I gotta go.
Super weird. They're all discussing. I don't know the order of these. There's two things that happen in like the next sequence, but I can't remember how they happen. So I'm just gonna say both of them, and then you can clarify maybe if you remember how they actually occurred. The two things are they're all discussing together how they're basically gonna like investigate this guy in a bit more thorough detail, and they end up deciding on Marco becoming a wolf spider.
Cool.
So I was wrong in my description before, where I said that we were looking at Marco turning into a tarantula.
It looks like a tarantula, if we're going to be fair, on the cover of the book.
It might be. I mean, it might just be like, just take a more recognizable spider, and then they say it's a wolf spider. But then the other thing that happened that's also like kind of a little bit significant for the plot of this book is that at a certain point, Marco is talking to Tom, Thom, for those of you keeping track.
Yes.
And Thom was basically talking to Marco about how he should come to the sharing and he should probably bring his dad.
Yeah.
And immediately Marco is like, my dad, like, it's weird enough that you want me at the sharing, you know, like-minded kids or whatever, and they're trying to get all these other folks, but bringing my dad in, he's like immediately concerned that his dad may sort of fall prey into this whole equation here.
Who invites dads to the sharing?
Thom
does. We call him Thom until he earns our respect. I'll wait for the day Thom earns our respect.
It won't happen. It won't happen. Jake
don't know that. We don't know that.
Jake can't even earn our respect.
That's true. Jake can't. If Thom earns your respect before Jake does, do you see that as like happening, being a possibility?
That is a distinct possibility. Yeah, I like that is absolutely on the table for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Thom. We know Thom is just being like tortured behind his little yerk brain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the poor guy kind of already has my respect a little bit. He has my pity, which is almost respect. That's more than Jake has. Jake doesn't even have my pity. So
yeah, all he wanted was a cute girl. That's it. That's all he wanted was a cute girl, and then he got a yerk in his brain.
Honestly, he's just like me for real.
So yeah, I forgot exactly why Cassie got the spider, but she's like, Marco, you're gonna morph spider. Oh, so I remember. Because Eric is an android, and clearly they can't see him in his android form as mammals, they decide maybe as an insect, and everyone's like, absolutely never. We're not doing insects. We're not doing anything like that. And Cassie's like, no, wolf spider. She's like, Marco,
what about arachnids, which are so different from insects?
They are so different. They explained it.
Listen, I'm going to say something, and this is going to be controversial, okay, to the listeners. But here's the thing. A bug is a bug.
Here we go.
All right? Let's be real. A bug, it's a bug. That's a bug. Right?
Well,
a
bug
fish
is
a
like
fish.
a general term.
Here's the thing. A fish is a fish, right? A bug is a bug, and a bird is a bird. There's no other animal types. That's it. That's just all that they are. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is a dolphin a fish?
Yes.
No, it's not.
It's a fish.
No, it's not.
No, here's
it's a
the
mammal.
thing. Here's the thing. All right, and I know this is hard for a lot of you listeners out there and your lizard brains to hear. But here's the deal.
Don't
okay?
you dare insult our wonderful listeners.
Here's the deal.
All 10 of them are very special.
Here's the deal. A bug is a bug, and a fish is a fish, and a bird is a bird, and that's it.
Wow.
And everything else, that's just an animal. That's
Wow.
it. There's 4 types. That's it. That's all they are. Does it fly? That's a bird.
We will not stand for this slander on this
Even
podcast.
if it hovers. Even if it hovers, that's a bird.
If it hovers.
If it swims, that's a fish.
Wait, so fly then is a bird because
No.
it can hover.
No, fly's a bug. Bug is a bug.
But if it can hover, it's a bird, right?
Yeah, but if
Isn't
it's
that
if it's a bug, it's a bug. If it's a bug, then it overrides the other 2 rules.
Okay, I like this.
Take all the time you need. Take all the time you need with this processing in your brain. This is true. This is just the way
I
the
think
world
you
works.
should start rewriting the Wikipedia pages of like bird, bug.
just go
fish.
in. Yeah, just go in. I'm just like,
Correct
many
everything.
people have specified that an arachnid is different from a bug, but it is a bug, and that's a bug.
But it's not.
And it's a bug. But so yeah, she's like, arachnid is very different from a blah blah blah, and then she says a lot of stuff that a lot of other folks have said to me in the past when I give them my bug spiel, but
they learn that Axe is like, I hate morphing small, and Marco's like, yeah, it's gross, and Axe is like, no, because like the rest of my body's just floating around in Z space, and everyone's like, what are you talking about?
oh,
Axe?
I forgot about this. This was
Yeah!
insane. I
This
can't
is
believe
crazy.
they threw this in here.
This was great. And Axe is like, well, don't you wonder what happens to your body parts when you morph something small? They just like disappear somewhere. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's weird. And he's like, yeah, it becomes like a little sack of organs just floating in Z space somewhere. God only knows where. And maybe one day an errant spaceship will drive through your body bits while you're in a small morph and destroy your body.
Yeah.
Very small chance, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
This is also insane, though, too, because in thinking about it, it also implies that if you morph big, that your regular body parts are just stuck as like little organ sacs inside of your big body, too.
Yeah.
Which is also just as freaky, but maybe not as much as an existential threat, but just as uncomfortable.
You're like all
to think
stretched out in the big morphs.
Oh my god, that's so creepy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, they have that conversation. Marco's gonna be like, fine, I'll go spider, because he draws the short straw. The description of him morphing the spider, I wanted to vomit on the train. I was like, this is disgusting. It's like,
it's honestly
3 pages.
one of my favorite morphs that I can remember. It was really fascinating. And also, so there's a part 2, because obviously we've experienced a lot of morphs at this point. So this is not really surprising, but the kind of like animal brain, or in this instance, bug brain, that takes over, because an arachnid is a bug. The bug brain that takes over gives him like the instinct to hunt. He's like, this thing is definitely a predator through and through. And Marco very easily gives in, and Axe kind of calls him on it. And is like, hey, why are you about to go after that beetle? And Marco stops himself and he's like, oh, sorry, I guess I just gave in to the instincts. And Axe is like, I am the same morph as you, with the implication being like, it's not that hard to kind of have control over this one. So kind of get it together. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where I thought that this book did a really strong job of always sort of tying back to the sort of emotional cost of violence, or the necessary dispassion that a lot of them have kind of had to adopt in order to fight in this war. And it's kind of very interesting to see it personified in this way, where Marco disappearing, sort of, so to speak, into this body, or into this shape, into this form, gives him the freedom to kind of like act out his aggression, act out his angst. And then reflecting on that feels almost like a secondary notion. And how that complements the sort of central theme at the center of this book, I thought was really fascinating. It's one of my favorite moments from the book, in a kind of a blink and you miss it, like little character development there.
Yeah, really interesting. I think he's going to be a serial killer later. So then he is a spider. He looks at Eric. He looks at Eric and he's like, hey, that's not a person. That's definitely something, but it's not a person. And
he can like see the skeletal like metal form.
He sees the paws.
What he's describing as basically a hologram. He says it has more in common with like dog paws than it does with like an actual like human foot beneath this sort of ethereal form.
And then he gets eaten by a bird.
Yeah.
First death attempt in this book to Marco, specifically of Marco. Not the last. He gets swallowed by a bird, and he's like, "Ah, what's happening?" And everyone's like, you just got picked up by a bird." And he's like, "Kill the bird, kill the bird." They're like, "There's crows everywhere. We don't know which bird you're inside." And so he describes himself being squished and squeezed, and his spider body is broken in so many different places. He's starting to lose consciousness. He actually imagines himself as a baby, and his mother like holding him and comforting him. And that gives him the incentive to start morphing. So thankfully he's not dead, but he bursts out of this bird and falls to the ground several feet below, right in front of Eric somehow.
Yeah, and Eric immediately is like, "Oh, you're the Andalite bandits."
And everyone's like, no, what?
And Marco's like, "Yep, well, cover's blown." Like he's going on in like his little head monologue. He's like, "Great, this is how it all ends." But instead, Eric does not immediately like blow his cover.
Yeah, does not snitch.
He says, "Stop by my." He's like, "You remember where my house is?" And Marco's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Stop by my house later, and we'll with your friends," referring to the other quote unquote Andalite bandits, "and we'll talk." And Marco's like, "Why should we trust you?" or whatever. And basically, Eric's like, "If I wanted to sell you out to Visser 3 and get something out of it, like I could have already done that. I'm not going to do that." And so they sort of take him at his word. They then cut to
Marco and his dad.
Yeah, Marco and his dad at dinner, right? And his dad is telling him about how he's basically he first he addresses the code that Axe had accidentally written and then subsequently deleted, that his
like,
bosses were like fascinating about. And then he says that he's basically being added to like some sort of military operation with his work. And we're still not really exactly sure what Marco's dad does, but suffice it to say, it's some sort of sciencey thing.
Space software.
Marco immediately is like, "Oh, this must be what the Yeerks are after," because he also recalls a time when his mom had apparently sort of like woken up in the middle of the night and said, like, rambling to his dad, something to the effect of, "Don't take the military job."
Yeah,
and
stay away
his dad
from the
was
military.
like, and his dad was like, "That was weird." And Marco, now piecing two and two together, kind of thinks to himself, that was clearly a moment of clarity that she had, irrespective of the Yeerk in her brain, and maybe like one of the last things like his mother, his real mother, really said.
Yeah, and it
before she had disappeared.
It was really sad listening to his dad compare their relationship, where like they were unhappy for some time, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, everything's perfect. The relationship is happy. They don't fight, and Marco again puts two and two together and is like, "Oh, that must have been when my mom got the Yeerk in her head, because the Yeerks don't care about fights. They just want everything to be easygoing." And so that was when she started to be controlled. And so, Marco's dad wakes up and sees her sitting up in bed. She says, "Stay away from the military." And he was like, "It just sounded like it was the most important thing she needed to tell me." And then she just went right back to sleep. Weird. And so poor Marco, just kind of like knowing exactly what happened throughout that whole time, and knowing that what looked like his parents having a really perfect relationship was actually just a complete lie and just controlled by the Yeerks. So very sad. Then they go to Eric's house.
They go to Eric's house. The plan is for them all to go in except for Rachel, who's going to stay outside and wait to turn into a grizzly morph to then barge in and save them if they need to. Great. They pop in. Eric's dad's like a little weird.
Yeah. It's
And
a little weird.
and he's like, "Do you like dogs?" And Cassie's like, "I wish I could be one." And he's like, "Okay." Like, this is.
That's
Like,
exactly
they're about
how
to
he
get
is,
murdered.
though.
Yeah,
He's like, you
they're
like
about to
dogs?
get, they're about to get skinned alive, is what I immediately thought. But they are not. They go into some sort of room, and then they realize the room is basically an elevator.
Into a
Takes them down.
basement.
And it takes them down into this huge open space, which actually reminded me a lot of like the description of like the first Yerk pool that we got in like
Oh,
book
yeah.
one. You remember like that's like kind of like the image I had in my head. Yeah, just without obviously like a Yerk pool,
Yeah.
but instead it was just just kind of like this underground little place stuffed with dogs. There's a billion dogs.
All the dogs.
And there's all of these androids. There's all of these like sort of figures that are kind of marching around in these sort of steel
The
bodies.
Chi,
And-
they call themselves.
Yeah, and so Eric starts to tell them a little bit of history about themselves. There's a lot that's thrown out.
A lot of
here
lore.
in regards to the lore dumping. So for one, so Eric explains they are the Chi. They were created from and I have no idea how to say this, but I'm going to say Pemalites.
I think you're right.
Okay.
The Pemalites.
Which were basically described as like dog-like aliens, who were, and this is almost a direct quote, slight paraphrase, but he says that the Pemalites had like Z space technology before the Andalites had even discovered fire. So like that, just to put into perspective, that's how long
Like how
that they've sort of been in
old-
existence.
Yeah.
And so
And Axe didn't like that much.
yeah, it took a little. He took a little.
He was like,
offense to that. So then, the Pemalites created the Chi, which are like an android species, but not used as sort of like artificial intelligence slaves. Instead, Chi in the Pemalite language means friend.
Yeah.
If I can recall correctly.
Yeah, they made them as companions.
Yeah, these companion entities, basically like I guess just helped them kind of enact a peaceful life because they were completely against all war. They didn't, they had no means of defending themselves, which actually
And they
set
had
them
no
up
natural
for,
enemies either.
Yeah, until
Until
this other alien race called the Howlers shows up and absolutely demolishes them because, again, the Pemalites are complete pacifists. They don't fight back, and they had already programmed the Chi to never fight back. They narrowly escape with only like a couple, 100 or whatever Pemalites and a couple hundred Chi, and they start basically looking for a new home. They recall a planet that kind of was a little bit similar to the Pemalite home planet, and that was Earth. They ended up basically being domesticated onto Earth. The Pemalites were wiped out from disease.
Only 6 were left to transfer, scan their consciousness into dogs, into wolves.
Yes. Yeah, so the Chi basically took wolves, put Pemalite consciousness into the wolves, and then wolves started breeding dogs.
Yep.
And so he was like,
just like
all
that.
dogs are Pemalites.
Yes.
They're like, or at least most of them, I think he says directly. So,
but the Chi were fine because they were androids. They couldn't get sick. They couldn't get disease. They just cared for the Pemalites until nearly every single one of them died.
Yeah. And so now the Chi just sort of exist all throughout time on Earth in complete hiding.
Yeah.
In this place, no less.
And they're
nowhere
immortal.
else.
They're completely immortal. They record everything. They remember everything. They have fake human life cycles. They just repeat over and over. But I like their reasoning. They want to fight the Yerks. Do you remember why they want to fight the Yerks, Gianni?
No.
Because if the humans fall, dogs fall too. And then goodbye Pemalites. Which I was like, huh. Okay. Like it's not about a species getting dominated. It's not about fighting for the freedoms of an intelligent creatures. It's because they want the dogs to survive, which I think is I kind of like that it's not like we have to care about everybody. They care about their creators, and they don't want to lose that that connection with their creators, because ultimately if they completely lose that connection, if they lose the dogs, what are their purpose?
Yeah, it's interesting, but I mean, the whole thing about it that I like kind of bugs me a bit is like, they want peace, like they want they want their dogs to be at peace. Mm-hmm. Earth is not very peaceful to dogs. I'll be the first to say. So like my dog, I'm looking at her right now, this sweet little thing. She's walking away because she's like, I don't want any part of this.
Bye.
But she came from Korea, okay, and she was rescued from the meat market, right? So I just want to at least throw out there, she's fine. Yeah. She's rescued. She's good. but I just want to at least throw out there that, like, the world is not very kind to dogs. I feel like if the Chi really gave a shit about dogs, they'd probably, get them out of here. Because the more populated this place goes, I mean, dogs are just, I don't know. I've seen many, like, I took humans and societies in college. Or animals in society, I should say. I know a thing or two about, like dog breeding and, like, overpopulation of dogs, overcrowding of dogs, what they do at dog shelters.
Inbreeding.
What I mean? Like, I learned some things, I think, in college that I wish I could forget. And I would go as far as to say that if she really gave a shit about dogs, it's not really the Yerks that they have to worry about, right? It's probably the past 1,000 years that they really have to worry about in regards to the human race. So, I don't know. I call a little bit bullshit on a lot of... Like, it's also silly to me that, like, the Chi, they've been around for however long, and I know that we don't know exactly where the Animorphs books take place, because then K. Applegate could kind of get away, but, like, we kind of theorize, like, it's probably, somewhere...
not in a dog-eating country.
Yeah. So it's like, it's probably somewhere in, like, the northwest region of the United States, something like that. The Chi all just decided to go to Seattle. Like, they all...
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
that's all there is.
The interesting things happening in all of the globe, all of the dogs that exist all everywhere, and they decided to go to fucking, like, Oregon. Like, I don't know. It's just... These are the types of things that I think about in regards to the science fiction world building of the Animorph series, that I'm like, I don't know. Are we sure? I don't know.
I get that. I think that's valid. Sometimes it just, you land where you land, and that's where you think all of Earth is. And it kind of makes sense to me that they're like, everyone loves dogs. This is the perfect place for us to connect with dogs. Because if they haven't actually seen the rest of the world, they have no idea how cruel it can be. If they're in, like, Portland, or like somewhere in the Northwest, I think. But
doesn't he say something that alludes? I can't remember it now, but there was, like, some sort of historical piece that he was like, we were there for that or something, and I can't remember.
What the pyramids.
It was now.
Oh, the pyramids.
Yes.
What the crap?
Yeah. What's going on with that? Yeah.
Hang on, Eric. So you're fine with slavery, but killing dogs? No. I mean, to be fair,
just something to scratch our brains about, perhaps. I don't know. Just drawing attention.
Very interesting, huh?
But I guess, like, getting back to, like, the actual plot of it itself, right? So we take it at face value. That's what they're here for. That's what they're really trying to do. That's what Eric's mission is. And he and some of the other Chi disagree about it, because there's another Chi that kind of comes over and is like, you told them all of our secrets. Like, don't do that.
I'd punch you if I could.
Eric's like, I am nice, but go away.
Go away. Shaking its finger at them. Go.
They also question Eric. They're like, why, because you were giving out stuff to the sharing. So, like, clearly you're working for the Yerks, right? He's like, no, I'm actually just infiltrating the Yerks. Yeah. Because, I'm trying to figure out more information or whatever to hopefully be able to take them down. And they're like, how are you doing that? He's like, well, I have... And he, like, opens
He's like,
this
check
little,
this
like,
shit out. And a Yerk is just sitting in his forehead. Just hanging out.
Like, half dead. Like, and he's like... Yeah, so basically I keep it alive with, like, these little bits of Kandrona arrays that I can just...
produce.
I just have.
I can mass produce. Which, why wouldn't the Yerks try to capture the Chi then if they know they exist?
This is what I'm saying. They're too powerful.
They can live in these android bodies and get fed, and they don't have to, like, take over an entire species.
Yeah, and these things, not to jump ahead, are pretty formidable. So
Yes.
I think it might be worth your while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't. They're a little too powerful. But anyway, he's got this. He's like, yeah. So I go into the Yerk pool and I project a hologram of the thing coming out of my head, and then I project another hologram of it coming back into my head, and then that's how I posed it off. And they're like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
actually,
that's kind of cool. I don't know how you project something out in the open air falling into a pool of water and swimming away, but I mean, they're all powerful. They can do whatever they want.
So I mean, if that wasn't enough of an exposition dump for you, there's still more.
Yeah, there's more.
It talks about he's okay. So this is where they introduce like a MacGuffin into this whole story here. And so the MacGuffin is this crystal, that basically is like a computer processor, and he got a bead that the Yerks had basically like purchased this crystal or like got it off of some sort of trader or something, and basically Eric believes that he could use this crystal to rewrite the cheese programming to make them not pacifists so that they can fight and get involved in the war.
Yep.
So
Not all of them are on
he
board.
needs
Not all the Chi are on board with this.
some of the Chi are like, we don't want to do all that. Eric's like, we have to.
Yeah, he's like, I want to.
So his idea is send in the quote-unquote Andalite bandits, get me this crystal, and then I'll help you win the war. Bang, bang, boom, we're good to go. So they're like, double dog deal, we'll do that for you. They kind of decide to like do it at like a later date. It ends up getting moved up. It's kind of not really clear exactly why Eric moved it up, but Eric calls
Eric's
him and
like,
is
no, now.
remember that thing we were going to do next week? Why don't we do it tomorrow?
Oh
And
yeah, because
Marco's
they were
okay.
putting in a stronger security system protecting the
yes,
crystal.
right. Yeah, as if this
So
one
they
wasn't
had to
strong
do it
enough.
now.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why they just didn't want to do it the next night. They just cut the extra security system. I don't care. Just do it the next night. Just do it the next night.
that's one of those things that I think an editor should have just popped in on this book and just been like, hey, I don't know why we're doing this. Let's just
cross it. So then they start discussing on whether it's right to change the nature of a species, if it's justified, no matter the cause. Like, do we have a right to change? Does Eric have a right to speak for his entire species and allow them to essentially be able to destroy whatever they want? Is that going to be like okay? And like Cassie's kind of the only one that really cares about this, and everyone else is like, well, it's just nature, eat or be eaten. So you know, it's just how Earth works, I guess.
Yeah,
so they're all like,
this kind
okay.
of felt like a conversation that Applegate just tossed in there to be like, hey, maybe something to think about before I go full Monty on this climax here.
That's right.
And so
Sorry about
they
the bell.
go
My
into...
cat jumped on my lap.
Oh no, that's right.
go.
We always love visitors here.
There he
So they decide that they're going to basically like fly out to the building, and then change into bug morphs.
Arachnids, Gianni.
They're all bugs. They go.
Wolf spiders.
But Marco, I think if I recall correctly, Marco and Axe are the ones in the spider morph, but then the
Yes.
rest of them are like
Cockroaches
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they go through the air ducts. Everything goes horribly wrong almost immediately. They're almost like...
They get chased by a rat.
Yeah.
They run out of web and fall down.
Terrible.
Which I don't know how their legs didn't all get completely broken falling from that height as spiders.
I don't know.
Because like even if they were like, let's say tarantulas, if they weren't wolf spiders, if they were tarantulas, I know that tarantulas are actually very, very fragile. And like even if it's huge, like if you hold it in your hand, if you drop it on the ground, its body is going to be completely broken. So you need to be really gentle when handling tarantulas. So I can only imagine a wolf spider, which is probably smaller, falling through the vent after running out of web and just hitting metal right on the body. But they're like, oh,
you'd
whew,
expect.
that was crazy. Okay, let's go. You know.
Yeah, they morph on out.
Yeah.
Then their next part of their plan was that they all wanted to be bats.
Yeah.
So that because there's some sort of intel that they got, I believe from Eric, that they can't touch like the walls, or like the alarm system
There's
will go
wires
off or whatever,
everywhere.
what have
It's
you.
pitch black in there.
Yeah, so they're all going to be bad, so they can use echolocation to kind of like maneuver around these different wires so that they don't set off any of the alarms. All goes well until they realize that they can't actually pick up the crystal
Yeah.
and still use echolocation. So
'Cause they need their
obviously, yeah, they're gonna have to alert whoever's here that they're invading. So they decide to instead go into, as they describe it, battle morphs.
Battle morph in
And
time.
everybody goes to like their sort of like signature kind of morph, I guess, in a sense.
Rachel, they echolocate, find the door as bats, and then they're like, okay, remember that direction. Rachel goes grizzly first. She runs through the door, busts it open for everybody else just to run through. Marco's in his gorilla. He has the crystal in his hands, and he's like holding the crystal, running through the hallways. And then they run into like a huge group of like Hork-Bajir and human controllers, like at least like 30 of them, I think. And they see that Marco has the crystal, and they're like, okay, well, we can't shoot you if you have the crystal because we don't want to destroy the crystal.
But fortunately, we have these guys who are literal walking knives.
Salad
We'll send them
shooters.
after you.
Yep. So
yeah,
they
so
get
they send in-
bladed, all
Yes,
of them.
they send in it's the Hork-Bajir, right?
Yeah,
These are the ones
yeah.
that are with all the saws.
With
and
all, yeah, they got all the blades coming out of their arms and legs and heads and bodies. And everyone gets beat the fuck up.
Yeah, Axe loses an
bad.
arm.
Yeah. In
and,
his regular Andalite morph, which
Marco
is
describes getting literally disemboweled.
yes,
And as Marco is like literally about to die, and he's like just sees everything fading away, he sees Eric come in and like forcibly grab the crystal. And then,
I think it was through a window, and with his like
Yeah.
last little bit of strength, he punches through the window, hands Eric the crystal, and Eric takes
then
it.
he wakes up, and everybody's telling him to morph out of his gorilla, morph out of the gorilla, and he does. Just in time, because he was like, oh my god, I think I almost died. They were like, you did die.
Yeah.
Eric basically shocked you back so that you'd have a heartbeat, just so that you could demorph again.
Yeah,
So
crazy.
and Marco's like, what happened? Eric's crying over in the corner. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. They all are like, Eric changed his programming, and he killed them all.
He obliterated them into dust. Every
yeah,
single
they
one.
were
He's like
all
all 24
dead.
Hork-Bajir, and they're like everyone.
Yeah,
Everything in that.
human controllers too. They're gone too.
Yeah, they're all
Everybody's
gone.
dead. And Eric is just like inconsolable. And
Yeah.
so Marco tries to talk to him, and Eric basically describes how the memory, because he's an android, he has to live with it far too vividly.
Yeah.
So it's not like a regular human memory. He experiences it in like its full form, no matter what.
And I
Eric-
love that he says to Marco, how do you live with the memory? And Marco,
Yeah.
like, before he knows this information, Marco's trying to comfort him and says, well, you kind of deal with it, and eventually it kind of fades away, it kind of goes away. He's like, I can't do that because I'm a robot. I'm a robot. I'm going to remember the entire thing forever in crystal clear 144 144p because it's the late 90s. But he's going to remember it every single second for the rest of his eternal immortal life. And he's like, I can't do that again. He's like, I can never ever do. He's like, I changed our programming back. We're going to be pacifists. We can't fight in this war for you. He's like, I'm sorry. I don't know how I'm going to live with myself. And so he gives them the crystal back. And Marco's like, kind of
after
shocked.
he's already changed his programming back to...
after he's switched his programming back to being a pacifist.
Yeah, so Eric's like, I can maybe give you guys some information, but that's the last time that I do anything like this.
Yeah.
And they're like, we totally understand. So the last chapter is insane.
A week
But
later.
it's not until all of a sudden you're like, what? They did what? they're hanging out with Jake's dog, and they're like
Homer.
they're like playing frisbee basically, and Marco's like diddling around with the crystal. He's like, wonder what to do with this thing. The dog takes it.
Yeah, he gives it to Homer. Homer holds it in his mouth, runs to the ocean, swims around, comes back without the crystal. Now, my first thought with this was like, oh, Homer's gonna eat it. And then they're gonna find it later. Or it would be amazing. Homer starts morphing into an android. That would be amazing. But no, that's not what happens. He drops it in the ocean, I guess. And the crystal's gone. And Jake's like, I guess we'll never find it. And Marco's like, maybe it'll wash up on shore. And by the time that happens, we hope that we will have defeated the Yeerks. And that's the end.
Which is insane. You just saw this thing be able to deprogram. If this is in the wrong hands. If a Yeerk gets this thing back and goes to your little buddy Eric's house and uses it to change his programming and has it work for them, Eric will murder the entirety of the world. And that's just Eric, let alone all the other androids there. This is on par, perhaps dumber, than the decision that Axe made to not kill the Andalite body of Visser 3. This is insane.
Wow.
I don't know how you let something this powerful just fade away. I don't know what they're thinking. Now, here's the thing. If they buried it or something...
That's different.
That's different. This
totally
is
different.
Let's drop it into the ocean. That's like it's like taking your car keys and then throwing them off a cliff and then driving the car off the cliff. Like, I don't know what we're thinking here. And this moment is the only reason why I don't think in good conscience I can put this above
the Predator.
The Predator. Like, this moment is ridiculous. I have no idea what they were thinking. This is insane.
Look, we've all seen what happens when Sauron's ring ends up in a river.
Yeah.
All that shit comes back. All that shit comes back.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess this won't.
I guess this won't. It'll just be in the ocean, hanging out.
It was so insane that when I read it the first time, I had to reread it. Because I was like, wait, what? I was like, there's no way. that they did what?
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Really?
That's what they did. You know what would be cool? If, like, a little button right on the very end, you see the crystal floating through the ocean, landing on the ocean floor, and then you see, like, a little, like, hermit crab go up to the crystal and try to, like, get into it.
just emerge. Tentacles
just suddenly larger.
Yeah. Just the Godzilla origin story from this thing. I mean, yeah, just insane. We have no idea what this thing does. Like, outrageous. I have no idea what they were thinking. I just don't know. But yeah, so that's the Android. That's this book. Yeah, what a sour taste for like an otherwise brilliant experience. It's like such a sour moment. But yeah, that's the Android.
That's it. So I think we discussed a good bit of this already. As far as putting it on TV, I like a lot of the violence. I like a lot of Marco's humor that he puts into it. I think it would be an episode a little bit centered more on Marco than like the group as a whole.
Yeah.
I obviously the stuff that we said we'd skip or kind of like take out, just adjust slightly, like with the security system. Nobody cares. It's hard to get into. Let's just focus on that and kind of move that forward. Let's see. I like the wolf spider stuff. I like Eric getting hit by a bus. I don't think you even really need the concert at the beginning. I mean, it's just like he doesn't have a smell, he's weird. But then they I think they could just see him at the beach handing out flyers of the sharing at some point, and then just kind of move forward from there of like, okay, we got to figure out like what's up, and then see him getting hit by a bus, and then like, oh, something's weird with this kid.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do like the kind of through line of changing your nature, and do we have to be this violent in order to survive? And the answer is yes, unfortunately. And I would like to explore that a little bit more in the episode, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Here's the thing. This is one of those where I like this book a lot. I'm a big fan of this book, obviously. I don't know. I have to see how Eric pops up later. But I think this might have too many questions. This might introduce too many questions to have a character this strong. And I think maybe the androids just shouldn't be a part of it, and that might be sacrilegious for a lot of readers to hear.
Wow.
What
if we had
just
adjusted them so they're not all powerful, not quite as all powerful?
But the problem is you can't have the end and they're not all powerful. You know what I mean? Like you can't. Have
that's
both.
true.
So I don't know if you just find another way to have a lot of the same themes. I don't know if Eric comes back, so like maybe you need this to kind of like be a part of it.
Well, what if we had Eric be the only one? He's the only one left of his race. What if we we can't really smush the Pemalites and the Chi together to be like one race.
Yeah.
Because of the lore that we got. Yes, this is kind of like tricky to write around. Because they're all powerful, but I kind of like the idea that Eric would be like the Doctor in Doctor Who, where he's the last one of his race. He's alone, he's immortal, and he is just trying to get by and reconnect with his masters.
Yeah, if it's just like one entity, maybe it makes a bit more sense. Because the other thing too is it's like, I mean, I didn't even like we talked about all the weird like kind of odd plot holes of how the Chi sort of exist on Earth or whatever, but like didn't even broach the fact that like why does Eric choose to be like a little teenage boy? Like there's not anybody less conspicuous that you could kind of pop up and be like.
Well, because they said they had life cycles of humans, so they start out as like small children, and then they quote unquote grow up.
I must have missed that. Okay.
It was just a tiny, tiny part in the book, but I thought it stuck out to me because I thought it was interesting that they're like, we have human life cycles, so we pretend to get old, we pretend to die, and then we start over and we do it all over again. Which I think, again, another parallel to Doctor Who with the regeneration and everything. I kind of like the idea that he's like, I'm tired of being alone. I want to join a group and I want to do some good.
Yeah, that has a little bit more incentive, like a little bit more motivation that feels a little bit more active than like we need to save these dogs. Because like I understand where you're coming from with something like that, but again, it's just like you should have been involved in so many more things if that's the going motivation, and I just don't think it's strong enough. But I mean, there's a lot of imagery to it that I like. Like I like the idea of like Eric being around to see the pyramids and like things like that. Yeah. Like I like those ideas. I like because they didn't outright say this, but I think alluding to maybe the fact that like Pemalites are what they based like the Sphinx sculptures on. Like that seems to me to be in line with kind of what we're going with here. So it's like I think that's really cool. They kind of like maybe were a little bit more involved at that period of time.
Yeah.
Obviously he's like more physically capable, so then like, builds the pyramids and like, I like ideas like that in regards to how you kind of space out science fiction. But again, it just needs a kind of overhaul on the actual, like, what's the reason then to completely pull back from human society? What's the reason then to have him want to be reintegrated into it now? And so I think that those are the things that I would kind of overhaul. Again, I'm of the opinion now, not knowing if Eric is ever going to come back into this series, I'm of the opinion now to just cut the character altogether and we find a new way to have like a sort of and I don't think it would be that hard to have like a climatic kind of end moment like this. But that's under the guise that like Eric never comes back again. I'm sure he's gonna come back again.
Yeah,
I don't see how you can introduce a character like this and not. But that's where I stand on it right now. Which obviously would be a drastic change that would upset a lot of people. And I know it's crazy to think about because, you know, we're sitting here saying like The Android is like one of the best books in the series so far, but it really, we're saying that because it is, but it also has a lot of baggage to it that I think would really weigh down a television series. Because the more things that you introduce that are this level of complicated, like we already have the Elemis, the more things you introduce, the more weight that you stack on this stuff to have a payoff later. And if we're not going to use these things to our advantage, then I don't know what we're really doing here. So I mean, if I had to do it, if I had to incorporate the Android into the sort of television series here, one, I would make Eric like a reoccurring character throughout like all of past episodes. Like Eric just pops up in like random places. He's always in the classroom. Yeah, he's prevalent, and then it's not quite as jarring. So that's definitely like one major change. Obviously, like little things like you were saying, you don't need the concert. You can have other moments where it's just like, oh, like for whatever reason, someone's in a morph for a specific thing. Yeah, that guy didn't have any
like
scent.
Maybe
that was really
near the end of the last episode. Not what was the last one we read? The Secret. Not The Secret. Let's pretend that one didn't happen. But at the
didn't. Not in our television series.
What secret? There's no secret. The book before. Maybe at the end of that, just as like a little button, that's when they realize that like Eric doesn't smell. And they're like, that's kind of weird. So that way in the next episode, we can be like, you remember when Eric didn't have a smell? Yeah, you think we should investigate that? Yeah. So that
you don't need him getting hit by a bus.
Why not?
You can go right to the tarantula thing.
No,
or
wait,
the
hang
wolf
on.
Spider thing.
I feel like we do need to get him hit by a bus, because if they think he doesn't have a smell and like that's weird, and then they see the bus thing, and they're like, okay, now we gotta figure this shit out. Who cares if he doesn't have a smell? He got hit by a bus and he's fine, and he glitched out for a second. That's weird, right? That's weird.
No, it's silly because like you don't need him to get hit by a fucking bus.
I want him to have him glitch out. Let him get hit by a bus if he wants to get hit by a bus.
You just want the comedy of him getting hit by a bus.
Let him get hit by a bus, Gianni.
I respect wanting the comedy of him getting hit by a bus. I respect it. I do. But yeah, and then I think he needs a better motivation to get involved than just saving dogs. So. I like the loneliness angle. I think that's maybe a more interesting thing. I think if you're going to have an android, if you're going to have something of this caliber, of this power, then make it a bit more isolated. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And especially if he's been around since the pyramids, he's been doing this human cycle for who knows how long, thousands of years. And he gets to a point where he's like, I'm sick of this shit. And now here are people that are different, that know that there are other alien species that have secrets of their own. I can help them in this war. Let me do some kind of good. Try to help some people. I think, it's to combat that loneliness, is to find a connection with people who are different from everyone else, like he is. He can find a sense of like camaraderie with everyone. Yeah, and then destroy his little heart at the end. Poor guy. About heart. Oh, also, I was like, what if they acquired him? They can't. He's an android. He does not have DNA. So we can't acquire him.
No robot DNA for you, sir.
No robot DNA, period.
Yeah. And then they have to bury the thing at the end. If they're not going to use it again, they need
the
to
crystal.
Bury it. They cannot throw it, and they have to know where the fuck it is. Too,
I think one of them should like morph a mole and climb into like tree roots somewhere. And hide it in a tree, something like that, where they're like, we vaguely know where it is, but nobody knows exactly where it is. Also, by the way, we didn't mention this. After Eric rescues everybody and blows everything up, he just magically puts Axe's arm right back on like regular.
I forgot to say that. Yeah,
so he's not armless anymore.
He sewed it back on, and like now he just has an arm again. which was
Healed
crazy.
immediately.
But yeah, I forgot about that. That was funny.
But yeah, I think those changes would make this much stronger thematically and story wise for this book.
Everything else can stay. Yeah.
Yeah, especially the bus. So would you like to, don't shake your head at me, would you like to go to the next book and see what that
Sure.
cover looks like?
Yeah. All right. I'm checking it out. Let's see.
Yeah, so this is
What do we got? The
book
Forgotten.
11,
Is that what it is?
The Forgotten, yes.
Okay, this cover is not terrible. Not
That's
like the
not that
last
bad.
one. The last one
What's the
might have
ta-
had the worst cover, I think, of all of them. This one's not terrible. But
What's that
another
tagline?
Another Jake story though. Oh, nothing
Yeah.
is what it seems is the tagline here, and it's
Dot,
Jake
dot, dot.
transitioning into what looks to be a cheetah.
No, incorrect.
Not a cheetah.
Not a cheetah.
A
Cheetahs
leopard?
have the cheetahs have the tear lines down the sides of their face. That's how you know it's a cheetah.
I never knew that. So what is this? A
Yeah.
leopard? Is that a
It
leopard?
is not a leopard.
Is it
also
a-
not a leopard.
Is it a?
What's the other one? What's the other one that looks like a leopard? Oh, Gianni. Uh-oh, Gianni.
It's another cat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
A jaguar.
Oh, I should have known that. Yeah.
It's a jagular.
For
and the
some reason,
way-
I didn't think jaguars were spotted. I did not. I don't know why I didn't think that. But
They
I never-
are.
for some reason, I didn't
Yeah.
think they were.
Jaguars and leopards are really hard to tell apart, but the way that you can do it, leopards have like spots, like circle spots that sometimes touch, sometimes they don't. Jaguars have those circles, but they also have dots between each circle. So it's like a
okay.
circle with a dot in the middle. That's a jaguar. Jaguars live in South America in tropic conditions, and leopards do not. And jaguars like to take their prey and kill it by snapping its neck and then dragging it up into a tree and eating it in the tree. And then they like to go for a swim. These have been jaguar facts.
Wow. That's great.
Are you you sound so impressed.
I'm fascinated. I'm blown away.
So what do you think is going to be forgotten in this book, Gianni? What's going to be forgotten?
Okay, I'm gonna go lofty. I'm gonna go lofty.
here we go.
with my
Here we go.
expectations. Well, actually, wait first before I throw this out there because
Uh-huh.
I think the pitch that I have just based solely off of the title is pretty cool. But is this one you remember or no?
Yes, it is. This
do?
this one's wild.
Oh, okay,
That's all I'll
cool.
say.
Well, then
This
I
one's
feel
wild.
a little more confident. Okay, here's my guess.
Okay, yeah.
Here's
Okay.
here's what I want. Right.
I'm ready.
The Forgotten. So
The
they
Forgotten.
somehow stumble upon a Yerk who is like part of like an Antifa faction of the
Like a
Yerks.
resistance group?
Yeah, like a resistance group of Yerks. They call themselves the Forgotten because they they went AWOL and now they control, but they control people specifically to get back at the Yerks themselves.
Oh,
And they're trying to
sick.
infiltrate it from the inside. And so they
That's
basically
crazy.
find a rebel faction of Yerks that are trying to start a civil war within the Yerk organization.
That's
is my pitch.
Crazy, Gianni.
That's my pitch.
That's
What do you
fun.
think?
That's
Yeah?
fun. I like that pitch. That pitch is really fun. I can't confirm or deny any of those details.
Yeah.
My thought for what you thought the plot of The Forgotten was going to be was that they knock Jake out, they take him into a part of the woods where he doesn't know where he is, and he wakes
Yeah.
up, and that's it. They just leave him in the woods.
God, I
so
wish.
they forget about him.
God, I wish. That would be way too... that would be way too good
It'd
for
be
me.
too happy for you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he would have to find his way back, and then I'd be like, oh,
No,
man.
no. He's just left in the woods. That's
yeah,
it.
they forgot him. They all forgot him.
They all left him in the woods. Like Open Water. Was that the movie where they forgot the two people that went scuba diving? And the boat left? And
Oh, yeah. Open water. Yeah.
Nightmare
Yeah.
fuel.
Worst case scenario.
I don't know if I can watch that. I'm scared to go on boats.
Not to throw us. Wait, you've never seen it?
No, I haven't because I'm scared.
Oh,
That's like one of my like worst fears is to be
I was
left
about to
out
just
in the
spoil
middle
it.
of the
I was
ocean.
about to spoil
Oh
it.
no,
I'm
you
so
can
glad
spoil
did.
it. I know they don't make it. They just die out there. And there's like
Well,
sharks and shit.
All right. Well, so spoilers for Open Water.
Yeah,
Actually,
sorry.
spoilers for Open Water 2 also. So-
Wait, there's a 2? How is
Yeah,
there a
there's
2? How?
I'm pretty sure there's a 3 also.
What? That's not possible. They die in
So-
the first one.
Yeah, so Open Water 1, one of the bleakest movies I think I've ever seen. Because
Yeah.
the whole time you just watch them struggle out there, and then they like try to get together some sort of effort to go save them, and they die. They die
Yeah.
in the open water.
And it's based on a
The
true
second
story.
one-
It's a true story. This
This-
actually did happen. They left people out there and didn't
It's true.
find them ever again.
It's true. And so so it's kind of a fictionalized retelling of what they think happened to them,
Yeah.
but they're not really sure. But the second one is crazier though, because the plot of the second one is
Even
like
opener.
downright stupid. So the second one is like these people on like a party yacht, and they all like jump off the boat. To like swim in the water,
Yeah.
and they realize that no one was left on the boat to like let down any sort of ladder or whatever, so they're just swimming next to this boat, unable to get back
Are
on.
you kidding me?
Nightmare. Absolute nightmare. I think about the plot of Open Water 2 like at least once a
Wait,
week.
why can't they just like make a human ladder of themselves and have someone climb up their bodies onto the boat
Listen,
to let something?
You're gonna have to watch the movie to find out. You really, I mean, I hope that entices somebody out there, because it's not. I mean, it's not a great movie. I don't
No,
wanna-
of
I don't
course
wanna
not. What's the
hype
third
it up,
one?
But just like, I don't know. But I'm just pretty sure there is a third one. Should I look it
Yeah,
up?
please look up if there's a third one, because I want to see how it gets
All right.
more open
I'm
watery.
giving it a goog.
Yeah, give it a goog.
I'm giving it a goog. While I'm googling it, how is your Buffy the Vampire watch
While
going?
you're googing. Yeah, so Buffy, I actually just watched a really great episode in the second season, where, okay, spoilers, if no one has seen Buffy. You should. Angel just turned to Angelus, so he's like a baddie now. And Sarah Jessica Parker, no, what's her name? Who plays Buffy? Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Sarah Jessica Parker would be a fun one.
She
That's
would be
fun.
horrible. I can't take her seriously as a Slayer. So Sarah Michelle Gellar, Buffy, is very, very sad, and she's talking to like Giles in the car, and she's like, "You must be really disappointed in me," and he's like, "No, I'm not. I think you are wonderful, and you did the best that you could, and you're very smart, and I respect you." And I was just like, oh my God. And like for an actor, like watching that scene, I was like, wow, that was really well written. And I rewound it and I watched it again and I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then that inspired me to start writing a play. So that's what I'm working on
Aw.
right now. Yeah.
That's great.
But yeah,
Wow.
so that was a really great episode, and I'm not too much further than that. But Angel's a baddie, so that's what we know.
Love.
Is there a
I'm glad that you're enjoying it. There is a third Open Water.
yes?
It is
okay.
Open Water 3 Cage Dive.
That's
and
not
from what I
open.
gather-
That's a cage.
Well, from what I
Caged
gather,
water.
the cage, the shark cage, is left in the ocean. That seems to be the plot. of
No,
the third
you
one. I have
can't
not seen it,
do
so
that.
I cannot attest.
They gotta pull the cage back
You
on the
can't
boat.
just leave it.
You can't just leave a cage with people in it in
You
the
can't
ocean.
just leave it.
You can't. You know what'd be amazing if the sharks jumped out of the water, bit the guys on the boat, so they couldn't bring the cage back up, and
Great
then
idea.
the sharks wiggle themselves off the boat back into the water when they try to
That'll
get
that'll
the cage.
do it.
Wasn't that like
That'll get
50
'em.
meters deep or 49 meters deep or something? Wasn't
47 meters down, yeah.
a number? Yeah, that was
Yeah.
part of that movie also. So did they just copy
I'm pretty
paste?
sure they're based off of the same event. Yeah, both of those movies. From what I see on Wikipedia here, it says that they are both based off of the same event.
This poor couple that got left out at sea. I feel really bad for them that they've just turned into a poor horror franchise. Like the families must be pissed.
But I think that about like every like major tragedy that's turned into like anything that's used for any sort of sensationalism is
True.
like how are you gonna make it so that it's like done,
respectfully
justice in
and,
a sense,
properly.
right?
Yeah.
Respectfully, especially if it involves like them dying at the end.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, how are we gonna?
Don't know.
You know what I
Talk
mean?
to the families. Who
I don't
knows?
know.
Anyway, this has been Morphin Buddies. If you guys want to email us and talk about us blabbing about things not related to the podcast, if you love that, if you hate it, either way, it's totally fine. Please email us at morphinbuddies@gmail.com. That's morphinbuddies@gmail.com. And let us know your thoughts, feelings, opinions. I think my goal for this podcast is by the
Okay.
end, by the last episode, I want to have 100 listeners. And I think that's
Wow.
very lofty,
Wow.
but I think that would be an amazing goal to achieve. I don't expect it to happen. But if you have friends that you think might be interested in a cool little podcast like us and they don't mind us ranting about stupid shit, please recommend our podcast. I don't have social media for it, so they can't just look at it. You just got to go direct them to Apple Podcasts or podcast.rs or whatever the podcast sites are. That's where we are. So that's the best I got. Any
Great
last
fish.
thoughts, Gianni,
Great
before we
fish.
head out of here?
No, I finished The Acolyte. It was good.
Oh,
It's not great, but it's good.
it gets
You
the
should
job
watch it.
done.
Yeah, I think it's
Excellent.
totally fine. If you like Star Wars, I think it's good. I think it's good.
Cool.
I haven't watched anything that's like super blowing my socks off yet, but or because I guess I'm watching House of the Dragon, of course, as always.
Oh,
but
is that good?
it's- Oh yeah, I mean I'm a Fire and Blood fan. I'm a George R. R. Martin fan in general, so it's
Yeah.
so yeah, it's hitting. It's
Good.
very it's good.
It slaps.
is good. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks, I guess, because that's when we release the episodes, every 2 weeks. So,
Great.
we got lives, we got full-time jobs. We're not getting paid for this. This is just for fun. So we love you. Thank you so much for tuning in and being patient with our nonsense. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Your little ear holes. Bye.